didn't end up here by accident. You ended up here because something in you already knows that the way you've been operating isn't working. And the uncomfortable part isn't that you don't know what to do. The uncomfortable part is that you do know. You've known for a while, and you still haven't moved. That's not laziness. That's not weakness. That is a pattern. And a pattern this consistent, this quiet, this good at disguising itself as reasonable caution. That pattern has a structure. It has a logic. And once you see the logic, you cannot unsee it. Which means this video either changes something or you close it and go back to waiting. There's no comfortable middle. Stay with me. Because if you've ever felt like you were watching your own life from slightly outside it, like the decisions being made in your name somehow don't feel like yours, this channel exists for exactly that. Subscribe now, because what gets built here, piece by piece, video by video, is the architecture of actually getting out of your own way. Hit the bell. Don't lose the thread. Now let's get into it. Here is the pattern. Every version of being stuck that you have ever experienced has the same engine underneath it. Not bad luck, not wrong timing, not the circumstances, the economy, the people around you, the city you live in, or the family you came from. The engine is simpler and more infuriating than any of those things. The engine is this. Somewhere in your history, you tried something that mattered to you, and it didn't go the way you needed it to go. And in the aftermath of that, a part of your mind drew a conclusion. Not a loud conclusion, not a dramatic one, a quiet one, barely even a thought, more like a new rule that got written into the operating system without your permission. And that rule has been running in the background of every decision you've made since. The rule sounds different depending on the person. For some, it's don't get your hopes up or you'll just get embarrassed again. For others, it's stay small, stay invisible, that's safer. For others, it's wanting things too much is what gets you hurt. The specific wording doesn't matter. The function is identical across all of them. The rule exists to protect you from repeating the pain of that original moment, and it is extraordinarily good at its job. So good that by now it doesn't even feel like a rule. It feels like who you are. It feels like your personality, your preferences, your natural tendencies. And that is the most sophisticated trap a human mind can build. Because you cannot fight what you cannot see, and you cannot see what you've mistaken for yourself. This is why people go to therapy for years and still repeat the same patterns. This is why people read every book, consume every piece of content, understand everything intellectually, and then watch themselves make the same choices again in slightly different packaging. Understanding is not the same as seeing. You can understand a pattern completely and still be inside it. Seeing it is different. Seeing it means catching it in real time, in the body, in the moment before the choice, not in the debrief afterward. That real-time awareness is what actually interrupts it. And that awareness only develops one way, through radical honesty about what is actually happening inside you versus the story you've been telling yourself about it. Most people skip this entirely, because the noise never stops long enough to do it. And the noise doesn't stop by accident. The noise is the avoidance strategy. Podcasts on the commute. Phone in hand the second anything feels uncomfortable. Scroll until sleep. Content until there's no space left for thought. And underneath the noise, quietly running, is the part of you that knows if things went quiet enough you'd have to hear what you've been working very hard not to hear. That you already know what needs to change. That you've known for longer than you'd like to admit. That the waiting and the hesitating and the almost starting is not caution. It is fear wearing the costume of strategy. Stop, not the noise. Stop the pretending that the noise is neutral. Every hour you spend in avoidance is not rest. It is a rehearsal of the pattern. You are practicing, over and over, the choice to not face it. And every rehearsal makes the next performance more automatic. You are not resting from the work. You are getting better at avoiding it. Here is the thing about that fear. It is not about the future. Everyone assumes their fear is about what might go wrong, but that's not where it lives. It lives in the past, in the specific moment that wrote the rule, the rejection that hit harder than you admitted, the failure that meant something about you that you were never willing to examine clearly, the person whose opinion mattered too much and whose verdict you still carry. Your fear of what might happen is actually just your memory of what already did. And the memory has no power over this moment except the power you give it by treating it as a prediction instead of a record. The moment you stop running from it and actually look at it, something strange happens. It gets smaller, not gone. Smaller, because the running is what kept it full-sized. The avoidance was the fuel. The thing you were afraid of facing turns out to be an old wound that your current self is fully capable of handling. You just never let your current self try because your old self was still in charge of the security system. Now, here is where emotions come in.
And this is the part of this conversation that most people think they already understand. They don't. They understand it conceptually. They do not understand it mechanically. Every time someone or something triggers an emotional reaction in you, there is a split second where the hijack happens. Something is said, something is done, something doesn't happen that you expected to happen. And in that moment, before you've made a single conscious choice, your nervous system has already decided how to respond. The heart rate shifts, the thinking narrows, the options contract, and suddenly you are not operating from the part of your mind that has access to your long-term vision. You are operating from the part that was built for immediate threat response. And that part does not care about your goals. It cares about survival, about not feeling the thing you don't want to feel, about getting relief from the discomfort as fast as possible. And people, specific people, and situations, specific situations, learn this about you. Not consciously in most cases, but they learn it the way every organism learns what produces a result. They find the thing that triggers the reaction, and they use it. Not because they are villains, because that is simply how influence works at the most basic level. Find the nerve, apply pressure, watch the behavior change. Every time you have reacted emotionally in a moment that required composure, you handed someone a manual. You showed them exactly which page to open when they need you off balance. You didn't lose leverage in some dramatic moment. You gave it away in 100 small ones. A sharp response to a minor slight. Over-explaining a decision to someone who had already decided what they thought. Defending yourself to a person who was never going to give you the verdict you needed anyway. Each of those moments was a withdrawal, and the account runs low faster than you think. The person who learns to create space between the trigger and the response does not become cold. They become unmanageable. In the best possible sense, they become someone you cannot move with the usual levers. Someone who does not give you the reaction you were fishing for. Someone who absorbs pressure and returns information instead of emotion. And that quality, that deliberate unreactivity, changes the entire dynamic of every room they walk into. Because most of the social maneuvering happening around you at any given moment is predicated on the assumption that you will respond predictably to certain inputs. Remove the predictability and the maneuvering loses its grip. Now I need to stop here, because what I just described, the pause, the space, the deliberate non-reaction, that is real and it works. If you start applying it tomorrow, you will feel a difference quickly. But I would be doing you a disservice if I let you leave thinking that is the answer. Because it isn't. It is a technique. And techniques are surface level. A technique manages the symptom. What we are after is the source. Here is the source. Underneath every reactive pattern is a belief, not a thought, a belief. A thought is something you have. A belief is something you are operating from without realizing it. And the belief that is underneath your particular version of being stuck is a belief about what is available to you. About whether the life you can actually feel the shape of when you are quiet is actually for you or just for people who started differently. People who had more, knew more, were given more. That belief is not logic. It is scar tissue. It is the mind's attempt to build a story around the pain that makes sense of it and protects you from repeating it. And it has been quietly deciding what you apply for, what you say out loud, what you allow yourself to want, what you convince yourself you don't actually care about, conveniently, right after the moment where going for it started to feel risky. This is the real work, not productivity, not optimization, this. The patient, uncomfortable, unglamorous excavation of the story you've been living inside without knowing it was a story and not a fact. If that is the kind of work this channel is going to hold you to, and it is, then subscribe here. Because this is not a highlight reel, this is a construction site.
And the thing being built is a version of you that operates from what is actually true instead of from what once hurt. That's worth staying for. Now let me talk about leverage. Not as a manipulation concept, as a structural one. Because once you start doing the internal work, the external world starts to look different. You start to notice things you were too reactive to see before. And one of the first things you notice is that the people who carry real weight in any room are almost never the ones doing the most talking. There is a kind of restraint that communicates more than explanation ever could. The person who doesn't feel the need to fill every silence, who doesn't explain their decisions to people who didn't ask, who doesn't announce what they're building or where they're going or how hard they've been working. That person is not being withholding. That person has simply stopped using words to manage their anxiety. And when you stop doing that, something shifts in how other people orient toward you. You become harder to read, and things that are hard to read get studied, get assigned weight, get treated with a kind of involuntary deference that no amount of loud self-promotion ever earns. You cannot manufacture this. You cannot perform it. The person who tries to seem mysterious is instantly readable. The person who is genuinely unreadable is unreadable because they are full. They are not performing depth. They are occupied by something real. They have a direction. They have work in progress that matters to them. They have standards for their own behavior that they hold privately, consistently, without needing anyone to witness or validate it. That fullness is what creates the quality, not the silence itself, but what the silence is covering. Here is a line worth sitting with. The most dangerous thing you can do in a room of reactive people is stay calm. Not because of what it does to them, because of what it does to you. Composure under pressure is not just a social advantage. It is a physical experience of your own capability. Every time you choose not to react, you prove something to yourself. And that proof accumulates. And what it builds over time is a kind of self-trust that changes the quality of every decision you make. Because you stop making decisions from fear. You start making them from a place that has been tested, that has been through the pressure and came back intact. That is what people mean when they say someone has presence. It is not a vibe. It is not charisma. It is the visible residue of 1,000 private choices made correctly. Now let's talk about what you are actually building. Because all of this, the pattern work, the emotional discipline, the restraint, the internal honesty, it only matters if it's going towards something. And most people who are stuck not only because of the patterns we've been talking about, but because they do not have a sufficiently clear picture of what they are moving toward. And so even when they do break the pattern for a moment, there is nowhere for the momentum to go. It dissipates, and they slide back. Clarity about direction is not a luxury. It is structural. Without it, discipline is just suffering without a destination. Without it, every sacrifice you make feels arbitrary, because there's no larger frame that gives it meaning. And meaningless sacrifice is not sustainable. No one keeps paying a cost they cannot justify. So what are you building? Not what are you planning to build. Not what you intend to build once the circumstances are better. What are you actually constructing with your hours right now? With the choices you make when no one is watching? With the way you spend the first hour of the morning and the last hour before sleep? With what you say yes to and what you say no to and what you say nothing to, because you have not yet committed to an answer. Because here's the thing about time that most people do not fully reckon with until it is too late. There is no neutral. Every day is either a deposit or a withdrawal from the person you are becoming. Not a dramatic deposit, not a huge withdrawal, a small one, in one direction or the other. But the compounding effect of those small daily choices, made consistently over months and years, produces a result that is either unmistakable progress or unmistakable stagnation. And at the point where the result is unmistakable, the individual choices that produced it are long gone. You cannot audit them. You cannot renegotiate them. You can only live in what they built. The person you will be in 5 years is being decided right now in the small, unglamorous choices that don't feel significant in the moment. The decision to read instead of scroll, to train instead of procrastinate, to sit with the discomfort instead of reaching for whatever relieves it fastest, To be honest with yourself about what you want instead of performing indifference to protect yourself from the risk of wanting it. Those choices are building something. The question is whether you are choosing what gets built, or whether you are just letting the default accumulate. Nothing about this is motivational. Motivation is temporary. It is an emotional state, and emotional states pass. What I am describing is structural. It is the decision to operate by a standard that does not require you to feel a particular way in order to execute. The standard is the anchor, not the feeling. And the standard is set by you, privately, in a moment like this one, when you are clear-headed and honest, and not yet in the middle of the temptation to do the easier thing. Set it now. Hold it when it costs you something, and type the word that describes what you are actually committed to becoming. One word in the comments. Not a phrase, not a sentence. One word. What is the version of yourself you are building toward? Put it there. Make it concrete. Make it exist outside your head. And share this video with one person who you think is caught in the same loop but doesn't have language for it yet. Not because it will help the channel, because having someone to share the language with makes the work less isolating. You already know who that person is. Send it. Now let's bring this back to where we started. You already know what needs to change. That was true before this video, and it's true now. The question was never information. The question was whether you were willing to stop managing the discomfort of not changing and actually face what the change requires. What it requires is simpler and harder than anything being sold to you. It requires that you stop treating your past as a prediction, that you stop mistaking your wounds for your character, that you stop outsourcing your composure to the behavior of people around you, that you stop waiting for the feeling that says you're ready, because that feeling is not coming before the action. It only comes after. You are not stuck because of what happened to you. You are stuck because of the meaning you assigned to it and then never revisited. Revisit it. Not to forgive it away or positive think your way past it. To actually look at it clearly and ask whether the conclusion you drew then is the conclusion that serves you now. In most cases, it isn't. In most cases, the rule that was written to protect you at 17 is the ceiling that is holding you at 24, 28, 32. The ceiling is made of old conclusions, and old conclusions can be revised. Not easily, not once and done. Revised gradually through the accumulation of new evidence that you create by behaving differently. Once, in a moment where the old pattern would have run automatically. One moment, then another, until the new behavior has as much evidence behind it as the old one. Until the old rule loses its grip, not because you fought it, but because you outgrew it. That is how this actually works. Not with a breakthrough, not with a revelation. With patient, private, consistent revision. You are closer to the version of yourself that you already sense you could be than the gap between you and it makes it feel. The gap feels enormous because it is being measured in feeling. Measure it in time and consistent action instead. And it becomes something you can actually cross. This is who this channel is for. Not the person who needs to be convinced they're capable. The person who already knows they are and is tired of the part of themselves that keeps acting like they aren't. If that's you, you're already subscribed. But if you haven't yet, do it now. Because the next video is going to go somewhere that might be the most uncomfortable place we've been yet. The question that will carry through that video is this: how much of what you call your personality is actually just a set of defense mechanisms that you built so long ago you forgot they were a choice? What in you is actually you? And what in you is just old armor that stopped fitting years ago but you never put down? That's next. Don't miss it.